Hello everyone. I love dictionaries. Breaking down words, finding dramatic synonyms to use in essays, all of it. So, when I was first delving into basic definitions of words, for my own knowledge, I decided to ask a simple question. What does it mean to be a woman? Not biologically, but the title itself. Woman, woman, wife, man. The origin of the term woman, according to Oxford Languages, is literally associated with the connection of the words wife and man. Actually, at some point there was a petition to remove sexist definitions under woman from the dictionary. There were example sentences like, I told you to be home when I get home, little woman, and they can become women of the streets. While these definitions sound absolutely absurd upon first notice, the Oxford Dictionary and its subsidiaries retained these definitions under the definition of woman until 2020, very recently. They justified retaining these definitions because there's evidence of their modern usage in society. But maybe if they stopped publishing these definitions, people would stop using them. Just a thought. Where sexism has become fundamentally ingrained in every part of society, it's key that we take a laser focus on issues that affect our teens. Prejudice is being preached at school, not directly by teachers, but in the school environment, it thrives. And ultimately, we can't still be dealing with the same issues that we have been for the last century. We can't be afraid of change. 4 years ago, I was living in a perfect world, where the differences between how women and men were treated were finally bridged, and suffrage was only something I ever thought about in the history books. I never thought about fighting for respect in the modern age, not even when boys shoved to get to the front of the line, or when they kicked us out of foursquare courts wanting tougher competition. But then, what changed? My patience, my maturity, but also my desire to succeed. When I first decided to try speech and debate in 2020, we were online, struggling through distance learning, attention span slowly shortening, person-to-person contact no longer a thing. I decided to try speech and debate so that I could become a more effective communicator, more persuasive, and become more comfortable talking in front of people. And at this point in time, 4 years later, I have competed at and even won large tournaments, presented about the activities several times, and have even coached rising debaters at both the middle and high school levels. I've competed in over 150 rounds and have experienced all sorts of judges, from the experienced, weathered coach to the new, exhausted parent. Both judges bring valuable points and feedback to the table. But one group is more susceptible to stereotypes than the other. Ballots which incorporate gender roles are the most frustrating to read. During a round in 2022, my partner and I had just finished the round and we felt really confident about how we performed. However, when we received our feedback, we were incensed when we realized our judge wanted a calmer and less assertive stance or a more emotional presentation in a debate round. This could be considered constructive criticism if it weren't for the fact that my goal as a debater was to be assertive, persuasive, and a more effective communicator overall. This is not an isolated example because according to the victory briefs, women are about 4 percentage points less likely to win a preliminary debate round. Why is this the case? Well, all boys tend to get off the hook easily because most boys can get away with being aggressive in a round. Especially in the crossfire period, where both teams are supposed to remain civilized in their questioning, boys tend to assert their dominance by snagging questions and aggressively talking over their opponents. This has become a major issue because according to CSU, while boys are more likely to be verbally aggressive, girls are actually more likely to be argumentative. This was actually showcased in a study by Felicia Jordan-Jackson, where the same verbal conflict was enacted twice, once with men and once with females. observers perceived the female conflict to be more aggressive when in reality, the actors executed the same exact conflict. The CSU study backs this up, finding that girls are more likely to be mistakenly perceived as being more verbally aggressive. Ultimately, Nicholas Matthews from CSU Long Beach phrases this perfectly. Women are told that they must communicate like men in order to succeed in debate. But when they do so, they are berated for relinquishing the feminine gender role. And ultimately, while this has become such a massive problem, this is actually prompting more female debaters to quit over time. In fact, female debaters are 30 times more likely to quit speech and debate than male debaters. On our own Saratoga High School speech and debate team, there are about 8 times as many men on the debate team as there are girls. So, how have I tried to fix this? Well, I've been pushing my friends to try out speech and debate for years now, but those who have already tried back off, complaining that rounds either get too competitive or that they don't think they have a fair chance against the 6-foot-tall boys from larger schools. In response, while this has become such a major issue, sexism in speech and debate is only a microcosm of a greater issue that I see in school. Sexism is circulated in the school environment like a virus. Think back to the stereotypical old classroom we all saw in old movies, right? The eager pick-me girl was raising a hand in the front of the class while the boys goofed off throwing paper airplanes in the back of the class. Obviously, the modern schooling environment isn't identical to this old example. However, boys are still put into groups with mostly girls because they're seen by teachers as too irresponsible or because they wouldn't do a good job with other boys. This has become incredibly problematic because it's found in a study by Leeper and Brown that educators tend to pressure students to fit into traditional concepts of masculinity, where the concepts of strength and physique are prioritized over traditional learning. Ultimately, this creates 2 issues. First, it punishes the boys that do work and forces them to conform to a standard where they are not evaluated correctly at school. In fact, according to a study by the University of Greenwich, where boys were faced with stereotypical manipulation by teachers, boys actually performed worse in reading, writing, and math. However, they performed better when they were told by their teachers to expect to be at the same level or better than girls. But the second issue that this creates affects girls. Girls are constantly told that they need to overperform at school. They're told that they need to submit the highest quality of work their teacher will ever read. And while this may sound nice on the surface, in reality, this cuts into mental motivation and makes girls more susceptible to burnout, making it even more difficult for us to create the highest quality of work. Further, the misconception extends into later years of life, where it's instilled that boys not doing their fair share on projects is fair. Yet, sexism in school is only one of the minor examples. Another major example I see has happened recently. Recently, we started lifting weights in PE. Lifting makes me feel powerful, like I can carry everyone else's burdens on my own back. In reality, no, I can't lift that much yet, mostly because I haven't tried, but also because I haven't gotten the opportunity to yet. Whenever it's time to practice a new skill in PE, deadlift, shoulder press, front squat, all the good stuff, boys are told to start higher, between 30 and 40, while girls are told to start lower, between 15 and 20. In retrospect, neither weight is much. However, whenever teachers talk about potentially lifting heavier for a workout, everyone looks to the strongest boys. But nobody looks at the girls who actually lifted more than the boys last class. Actually, there's a trade-off in real life, because in the gym, women actually tend to do more reps because of higher pain tolerance and mental motivation. However, this misconception that boys can only lift more than girls extends into all areas of life. Teachers need to stop enforcing the stereotypes driven by statements like, "You're a girl, so you can do this," or vice versa. Girls start to be confined to the quotas set by their teachers, and as soon as which is mistaken given that most can eventually overperform and do better in later years. So, how can we finally solve this? Like I said earlier, it's key that we start by addressing issues affecting our youth, because otherwise we'll be dealing with the same issues that we have been since the beginning of the education system. But the best way to act is by calling out microaggressions. Microaggressions are everyday statements, perhaps unintentionally made, which convey racist, sexist, or homophobic ideals. The misconception about microaggressions is that they don't matter because they're small. But in reality, microaggressions have been found to be the leading inhibitor of high performance, self-esteem, and even team morale. The more we start calling out statements like "the girls can all start with lighter weights," the closer we'll be to challenging the stereotypes that have been so firmly rooted in our society. I specifically have moved to call out microaggressions by calling them out whenever possible, because just the act of calling it out can force adults to double-check their statements in fear of the consequences. But further, an argument has been developed in the debate space to specifically counter IST behaviors. It's called a critique, spelled with a K, German for criticism. This argument is usually read between the beginning and middle of the round, where if a microaggression has occurred, or if either side has done anything unfairly, they can be effectively called out and it can act as a voting point for the judge. One example of a critique is a femK, which debaters use to argue for feminist ideals in and out of the debate space. There are many other types of critiques which also aim to counter different types of microaggressions. But ultimately, now that we've reached this point in time where any action that we take is going to have a major impact on the future, it's key that we start by addressing these issues now while we still have the ability to do so. Because as long as we keep ignoring the differences between how women and men are treated in fundamental spaces, we'll never actually be making any progress. Thank you.